Welcome to the Matriarch Podcast, a sisterhood of legendary Black queens in the making, speaking about real issues, questions, thoughts, ideas, lessons, and cultivating future experiences. So let's get our crowns, wine, slippers, and start the conversation. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Matriarch Podcast. I'm Ashley Washington, your host, and right now we have Sylvetris Hlongwane with us today. She is going to show us about women in leadership today, and not only are we talking about it, she has walked it. So, 23 years she has served in the military. Is that correct?
I'm at 24 now.
Yay!
Yes,
Congratulations. And
yes.
thank you so much for your service. We are
Thank
so
you.
appreciative. We've talked in the past. I always say that I'm just a civilian in comparison. So it's just always nice to have and thank those that serve for us and with us.
Thank you for
So
your
just give us
support.
a little bit of insight into how you kind of came about. Tell us where you were born, and then we'll follow up with some questions about just kind of how you ended up with your interest in the military.
Well, good morning, Ashley and listeners. First off, thank you so very much for inviting me on the podcast, especially during this very important month to highlight women's history and things of that nature. Like Ashley shared, I'm Sylvetris Hlongwane, 24-year active veteran in the United States Air Force. I was born in East Point, Georgia, and was raised in Sumter, South Carolina. My story with the military kind of begins in ROTC at high school. I went to Sumter High School, graduated from there, and I participated in junior ROTC and their program. A lot of interest. I loved the camaraderie from being involved in a group such as that. I excelled greatly in that. I always had a vast interest in the airframe industry, if you will, and that spoke a lot to some of the criteria that we had to develop and achieve while in the ROTC program, in addition to how to get through certain missions and things of that nature. I also had the pleasure of having a few family members that served in the military. And an uncle on my mother's side that served in the army, actually served in Vietnam, and a few members on my father's side. And just seeing the pride that they kind of spoke a little differently, moved a little differently. They had a lot of experiences that I would not have achieved. I didn't see myself achieving based on what they shared with me, staying in or around the area that I grew up in. I knew that I had to branch out, and the military provided that avenue for me. So that kind of sparked my interest and had me ask some questions to the recruiter, and there started my journey.
Wow, I love
Mhm.
that. Also, it's really important that we start kind of at ground zero
Okay.
because piquing what piqued your interest, seeing those that served. I too and my family have had many men and women serve on both sides of my family as well. But your interest peaked at a very young age,
Hmm.
which I recognize when you say my uncle carried himself a different way and
Hmm.
other members of my family carried themselves a different way.
Hmm.
And it's really important to acknowledge that first and foremost, the confidence that comes from
Hmm.
that, but
Hmm.
also just kind of the exploration that is also involved. As you travel to different cultures and experiences and areas in the world, it seems that you learn more about yourself as well as others, but you really grow. Can you speak to some of that?
I can. When I talked about, I'll start with my uncle on my mother's side, my uncle Herman. I remember he would always come to my grandmother's house, and he always had fish. I don't know how many times this man would go fishing during the week, but he would always come over with some fish that he'd caught, and he wanted to prepare it a certain way. He would start his own fire. We would sit outside. And even though I did not necessarily want more and more fish, I knew to hear his stories, I needed to sit out there with him and possibly eat whatever he was cooking that day.
Wow. Wow. I
So
love
he always talked about, and he would always cook the fish differently every single time. I don't remember it being prepared one way or the other. So if I needed to ever recreate a dish, I could not. It's just not happening. But he always talked about, yeah, this is how we made it when he had to go to war, or when he had to go someplace else. And he talked about, that was actually my first introduction ever to sushi. He talked
Oh,
about sushi. That was my first time that I can recall ever hearing the word sushi. And he just shared a lot with me. And you mentioned the word confidence earlier. He always had this certain level of confidence. He was incredibly calm. I didn't chalk it up to, even though he was the only boy of 7 children and the oldest male, I didn't chalk it up to him being a male. It was just a certain air about him that was very intriguing. How calm he always was, how confident he was. He was so sure of everything, and he had so many experiences that he
mm-hmm.
could share with me. He didn't serve for a long time, but even I could recognize in whatever the length of time of service that he was able to give, how much experience he garnered in that time. And all he cared about was how he could pay it forward and share it with us.
I love it. I
That
love it.
really sparked so much for me. And I've always carried that with me. And I wanted to know a little bit more about that. So when ROTC came available, I immediately jumped into that, started learning about traveling, different things. Of course, looked up the areas he said he was in to try to figure out what fish he may have possibly caught in those areas. Because
No, that's right.
it was just hilarious to me. But same with the other family members that I saw. They would leave for prolonged periods of time, and I was just curious. Like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Where are you going?
Right. I think
What are
that's
you?
always kind of half the battle. Like when you're a
Yes.
family member of someone serving in the military, those are kind of two of the key questions, right? Because as
Hmm.
quote unquote civilians, we don't get an inside look as to where you're going and what are you doing.
Yes. Yes.
We say serving, but that means a multitude of things, from aid to front lines to, every
Hmm.
position is important. And could
Hmm.
you speak to some of that?
The front lines.
No, not necessarily the front lines, but
Hmm.
just, when we say, oh, our cousin or our aunt or uncle are in the military,
Hmm.
and they're off to whatever city or country.
Hmm.
What does that entail? Because, and not, not specific to your mission,
Hmm.
but specific to giving us a glimpse into what military life is.
Absolutely. So we have different areas that when we go to these places, it's because the military is very strategically located in specific areas to carry out a mission. For instance, you see that our Navy counterparts have to go to bases that are most likely near water, because if they need to respond quickly, that's where they're postured and they're positioned to react the best on behalf of our nation.
Mhm,
Same with the Air Force. There's certain areas that we need to be positioned and stationed if we have assets in certain locations because of the land that's afforded in that area, that we can purchase and develop for military purposes. Or where the president is, if we need to be postured, obviously we need to be postured effectively to respond to the office of the presidency and react around the resources that encompass over in that national area. So when we're having to move around, when we can't stay at home, it's
mhm,
because we have to be strategically placed in locations to respond the way that we need to. Some individuals also, depending on your job,
mhm,
while the all branches of military service have pretty much the same jobs as far as civil engineering, legal, our aircraft maintenance, things of that nature, while that may be the same, the type may be different. One location will have a different aircraft than another location. So when I first came in, for example, I'm an example person, so please forgive me.
No, we love
When I
it.
first came in, the airframe that I worked on was the A-10 Warthog. That's only at specific locations. So I couldn't always be stationed closest to home. I had to go where the airframe that I was trained on is located.
Nice.
So when
Wow.
folks have to leave, it's because they may be responding to a specific mission and trained on certain assets that are at particular locations. And I thank you for that question, because a lot of families can't understand or don't typically understand, why can't you stay home and do this job? And it's because they
Yeah.
were trained to do a service, and unfortunately it's at this location.
Mhm.
But the Air Force in particular, I can speak to that, are doing very well in working programs to try to help members stay as close to family for those that desire that. For instance, we have a child care program that was just introduced. Quick shout out to the Air Force on that right now. Where if we
Amen.
have families that have divorced parents, but there are children involved, there's a program where the parents can file to remain as close as possible for as long as possible for the sake of the children before we have to send a service member to another location.
I'm so glad you brought that up because there a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're an individual serving in the military."
Mm.
Times people don't realize that your families are serving as well, and that needs to be
Absolutely.
recognized tremendously because that is a separation, from your children, from your spouse, from your loved
Absolutely.
ones, and, as much as your family members may try to follow or what have you, implementing that program is so, so crucial to not only the success of them serving in the military or you guys serving in the military, but it's also crucial
Mhm.
to the family and its survival. So kudos, like you said, to the Air Force for
Absolutely.
implementing that.
And that's very much what the approach was before. You volunteer individually, so it is somewhat of an individual service initially, looking at it in the sense of, if we did have a married couple, they are able to keep in their records that they would like to move together. They're also able to put in their records that they don't care if they move separately, surprisingly. So when a divorce occurs, that code is instantly removed because they don't have that union. So an additional program was established if there are children involved to help that.
Wow. Yeah, that's great that
Mhm.
you can not only can you select, but you can select options, which is
Yes.
almost I've never heard of that, and I've had 8 total serve in my family, through my duration, I haven't gone down the family tree, but that just was
Hmm.
not an option. You went where you were told, and that was just it,
Hmm.
and then you
Yes.
make way, and if your family can move, they can, and if not, they just stayed where they were, and they would come back, so yeah, that is absolutely amazing. So let's get back to a little bit women in leadership.
Wonderful. Yes.
Can you tell us about your status, which is commander? Can you tell us for those that don't really understand the military? Number one, what that ranking is and what it means to the military holistically.
Yeah, so I'm currently serving as the command chief over at Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, the world's most trusted and dominant intercontinental missile wing.
Love it, love it.
Yes, sitting in this role, I am the highest ranking enlisted individual on the installation. I am currently also sitting in the highest enlisted grade,
Okay, so
and
I'm
that
gonna
is
pause
a
you right
sir.
there, and
Okay.
I am snapping, literally, because that is history. That is history. You are a Black female commander chief And these are the moments. Your daily presence is making history. And I just want to pause and recognize that, because that is something that just we need more of, right? We need more of that type of women in leadership, whether it be the military or otherwise, because so many Black women out here are doubting themselves, saying they can't. Um, we'll dive into this a little bit later as to where you found the confidence to lead while in the military, but also maintaining yourself. But I just really want to pause here in that recognition. Do you really, number one, do you
Thank you.
realize the history that you are currently writing right now as we speak?
I do. It is a heavy honor. It's definitely an honor in the sense that I am thankful to have been entrusted to have gotten to this level. Absolutely. It's heavy because I understand what it means. I've learned the impeccable value of what it means to own the room, bring to the table above all else my worth, and I am it's not lost on me what I may mean for someone else. I remember very vividly when I first saw a Black female chief master sergeant. I remember what that looked like, meaning how I felt the first time that I saw her. Like, oh my God, this is possible. And I was well out of the airman range. I was actually an NCO before I saw my first African American female chief. And to know that that could be me, to see the possibility. It's one thing for someone to tell you, but when you can see that, it is absolutely incredible. It takes on a whole different walk.
Yes.
And that was not lost on me. So the same way I saw myself in her and saw what was possible, I know I'm now that for younger women. So as such, I ensure I speak with clarity and purpose. You cannot stop me. I am a well-trained airman, and I'm a compassionate human being dedicated to protecting and serving my country. And I know that other women that look to serve in the same way that they're looking at me. So it is a heavy honor that I greatly accept.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and you are wearing it. You are looking fly. I have never seen you with a wrinkle. You are always bright. And I love, because representation matters, right? So,
It does.
from a military perspective, and you seeing her, knowing that you could go further, this can be achieved, is something to be recognized, not only
Thank
within the
you. Yes.
military, which has very low, um, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the count of those that progress to higher rankings are have less Black representation, um, as you go up in the rankings. Am I correct in saying that?
There is truth to that. There is a lot of truth to that. I can pull you some numbers, but there are not a lot of us in the first place. So
Mhm.
for chief master sergeants, we are actually 0.7% of the entire enlisted corps. Oh, that's all that there is of us. So only 0.7% of us will ever be promoted to the grade of chief.
Wow. Sorry to hear you're so
And
shocked, but wow, it's much lower than I thought. And you said 0.7%, correct?
yes, you'll hear us sometimes just round up to 1%. We'll say the 1% of the enlisted force. It's 0.7%.
Wow.
So the higher we go, absolutely, the smaller the smaller my sisters get.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Well, I number one, just addressing, it, it is reflection of it's a true reflection of what it is to be, just kind of out in society as well, right?
Mhm.
Women, black women in particular, make up 3% of CEOs. But while that list is growing, and we're glad that it is, we're talking about Fortune 500 companies, which would be the equivalent to Chief Master Sergeant, correct, in the military?
Yes, that is correct. CEO is equivalent.
Exactly. So, it's important that we get this number up, but we also kind of reach back a hand to the sisters that are trying to climb. And
Mhm.
that's why I really wanted to have you on this podcast because number one, I want other sisters to see, hey, this is possible, this is obtainable. But also being proud and walking proud. Our story didn't start in slavery, and I say this all the time. We started as kings and queens in Africa from the motherland, and we were taken from that land. And even here, we can still thrive. And you are a walking example of that. And I am just super, super proud of you and what you've accomplished. But
Thank
you
you.
also walk a tightrope and/or balance of not only military, but when we see you out, it is just, "Hey, I'm just Sylvetris and I am out. I am." And I love the fact that your favorite color is orange. And you make no mistake about showing up in your not only as yourself, but bright and beautiful and airy and feminine, which is a stark contrast. And that's why I said a tightrope to the military, where you're in uniform. You're dressed to look within, your within the military as uniform, right? Broad brush, this is how we walk.
Mhm.
This is how we are to present ourselves as one from a military standpoint. But your personality is so big and beautiful and bright, and you show up that way. So, how have you maintained your individuality while also being in the military?
Well, first off, thank you for all of that.
That's just how you
I'm
show up. I'm just being
straight
honest.
blushing over here right now. Like, oh my goodness. And I teased with someone else. I said, you never know how someone else views you. You never know how you appear to someone. I think we're just having a conversation. One of my airmen got a message from someone thanking them, and he was like, I didn't even know that they saw me. It's like you don't know who sees you, who's watching you. So it's very important how you carry yourself. But I didn't I didn't know that. So I appreciate that. And it's encouragement like that keeps me going. Just so you know.
Mhm.
I love all of it. But for the balance, I am definitely a person of faith, first and foremost. I am very grounded. I remain very grounded. I keep a community around me that helps keep me very grounded. That was definitely rooted as well in my upbringing. A lot of the successes, a lot of the grounding, a lot of how I move definitely comes from a place of authenticity, more so now. The reason I say that is unfortunately there was a bit of imposter syndrome
Hmm.
that went on for a little bit because things were just different for a female of color. Probably one for a female. So I did find myself fighting a double bias early in my career, more so than I'm fighting it now. It's a little easier now because my voice is developed, and due to the position, a lot of folks aren't as bold with me as you would expect them to have been with Airman Sylvetris. So I do take that into consideration, and that's why I make sure that my voice remains as impactful as possible because I realize who I'm speaking for now.
Mhm.
and how it affects them, where I did not always necessarily have that voice to advocate on my behalf. I understand what I need to be for my airmen and when I need to be that for them. But a lot of authenticity, when I say I learned how to grow into it more so now, is because I have seen so many people come and go.
Mhm.
Ashley, it's just the number of folks that rotate through the military, whether they leave for disciplinary matters or whether they just realize it's not a good fit or what have you. Because I've continued to stay. It's been my choice to allow this to be constant in my life and in my career choice. So in that, I cannot tell you how many people I've seen come and go, and through those different characteristics and personalities and watching how jobs come and go, the one thing I will always have is myself.
Mm.
And if I continue to try to fit in or do all the things that I saw my counterparts doing, and they were getting recognition so easily, but because of who I am and how I look, that it posed some additional challenges. But when Sylvetris always emerged, it evoked a different type of response from folks. And that's what I had to learn, that it was okay for me to always be myself. I mentioned the jobs coming and going earlier because I wanted to tie it to, while I'm seeing that, it doesn't matter if I'm in that position or not, they will always have someone else to do it. That job will always get done.
Mhm.
How I move and how I can progress from that is what I had to learn. It didn't matter if Sylvetris was trying her best and burning herself out and stressing herself out to try to compete and stay up with with her other counterparts that didn't look like her. What mattered is who I am and my authenticity. When I sat down and I spoke with people and they got to know me and the leaders got to see how I interact with people and how I perform and where my care factor comes from, that is what moved me. That's where those opportunities began to develop. That's when those doors that I needed to be at, that God was trying to, and you always hear that still voice. I promise you that's God. When he's talking to you and he's trying to tell you, and he's, well, not trying, he's telling you, you're trying to listen, you're trying to do what you do. When you take that moment and you move the way he's having you move because of who you are and how he made you, that's when I noticed how the successes would begin to flow for me, and they have not stopped.
Amen. Oh my goodness. That is so powerful. I
Yeah.
pause and take a deep breath, because that experience is so relatable. So
Yeah.
often, and this is why I had you start at ground zero. So often, particularly as women, we are instructed to conform. We are
Mhm.
told to conform.
Mhm. Mhm.
And through our love for others, we try to conform. And
Mhm.
what you realize, if you're blessed enough to get to a certain point where you lean on God and you say, okay, I have done every single thing I possibly can, blood, sweat, tears, you name it, late nights, staying up 48 hours, you name it,
Mhm.
and nothing is still coming into fruition. It is that moment that you say, I'm just going to let it go and be
Mhm.
myself, because showing up as self is the most powerful thing you can ever do. And that is the way God made you. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for sharing that. And
Absolutely.
that is when the leadership starts. I truly believe that. Um, I just, I am holding that. So thank you for sharing that. And I feel that it is so true to so many experiences that women in general have, but Black women specifically, where you're made to hold it all together represent your ancestors, represent everyone that is before you and after you, and speaking or being a representation of the Black women that are in current day, is a burden that we carry specifically. And you have carried it gracefully, proudly, and it is just something that goes without saying, but we are just so proud to see. So thank you for, again, just carrying that crown and the weight of it, and sharing that with us, because that is half the battle. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So another thing that you touched on was a double bias. That was, internal, external. And then I want to touch on the imposter syndrome. So if you could talk about that a little bit more and how that affected your leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, the double bias that I was speaking to when I first came in, because of how I envisioned the military, never would I have thought that this would be a place where racism resided.
Hmm.
So, that was not any thought that I ever had coming into it. I look at it, I see so many different people from so many different places all working together. And from what I could tell, how I was conditioned to believe is that this is a set of elite individuals. Never would I have thought racist individuals also serve,
But-
bigots also serve.
mhm.
X, Y, and Z, the same thing that we have in any civilian capacity, also serve, which I later found out is also why we had a military justice system.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because we still had to hold our own individuals accountable. So when I first came in, I was immediately met with the female bias, being different for many years because I worked in a this is already viewed as a male dominant career, the military in general. You start breaking out specific career fields, it gets even more male dominated specific. And working on the flight line, on an aircraft flight line, is one of those such positions.
Mhm.
I can count of my 8 years on the flight line, there was a 5 year period where I was the only female.
Wow.
And that did not always go over very well. My very first supervisor ever in the military actually told me that he felt that I should be in the kitchen. He did not feel female should be in the military. Um, he actually said this in front of other males that I worked with. So at the time, you can tell, okay, if your supervisor doesn't support you, any help that you need, it plants a seed for them,
Mhm.
especially when no one speaks up.
Mhm.
It it made I did file a complaint later, which made my case very easy that I had witnesses.
Right. Right.
But just that type of stuff. So giving me like menial tasks to do, that was a lot of, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was also a bit of imposter syndrome that had to be put on because I needed to make sure that they understood I knew what I was doing,
Mhm.
even when I did not always know what I was doing. And it was more difficult to find out specific tasks because I was the only female and no one wanted to be saddled with the female.
Mhm. And it's also
So,
those opportunities that are presented to you, right? Or not
mhm,
to you.
mhm,
That kind of
absolutely.
feed into that narrative of the imposter syndrome. Because you're like, if this is all that I'm doing, and you were saying earlier, you've seen so many people in and out that look like you. Um,
Yes.
those are the reasons why, because in those moments, and thank you for sticking in there for years,
Mhm,
in those moments, that's where that imposter syndrome rises, because you don't have those opportunities before you to prove
mhm,
or
Mhm.
give you like, this is what I've accomplished, and this is why I should move forward.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back a little bit to our earlier discussion as well, Ashley, where even though I obviously wasn't the first female in that position, because I was at the time the only one, there wasn't another one to look up to
mhm,
or to go and talk to try to get through any of that stuff. So it was a lot of kind of out on the island. Even the males that were other minorities, they weren't even always welcoming because they had already been accepted,
mm,
quote unquote.
gotcha.
But there was one in particular that when he was moved to my shift, and he was an African American male, he and his wife took very good care of me. I really appreciate it. Like, she would come up to the unit and check on me. He let her know that I was in the unit, so she would come up and check on me. He would kind of help me with my training, tell me where I needed to be, and or I should have been, rather, with regard to my training. So we have milestones that we should be hitting
Mhm,
to continue to progress. So he came in. I was very grateful when he came in, and he kind of shut down a lot of the talk that my supervisor was already kind of poisoning the well with, if you will.
mhm,
So that's where a lot of that imposter syndrome came on. Somewhat of a fake it until you make it.
mhm,
And being afraid that, okay, if I remove this mask, I'm going to be exposed as, oh, okay, she doesn't really know what she's doing. But thankfully there was enough of drive where, okay, you need to understand that I know how to do this. I need to attach myself to this individual so I can learn.
mhm.
If somebody doesn't want to teach me, that's fine. I need to seek it out.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of that ended up being.
Hmm,
I don't regret one bit of it. Because had that not occurred, had I not known what a crap supervisor was, had I not known how to move or how I needed to move to get in positions to start looking stuff up, to start seeking out networks and what a network was and how a network helps and who's for me and who's not for me, so I know how to position myself, that would have hindered so much stuff, I truly believe, because I was setting a foundation for things that I would have needed. The higher I get, the easier it doesn't get.
mhm. Yeah,
The challenges remain. But as far as how to navigate them, oh, I can 100% rock with you on that, because I have been building myself with it, and it's not going to be easy for you.
mhm.
Try all that you will, but you won't get far.
Amen. I'm sorry that you had to go through that, number 1, but you are so grateful for the experiences that help you grow in other places that you wouldn't have been otherwise. So, I'm so
I am.
glad. I hate that you had that experience, but I'm, like you said, just glad that you had that experience so you know how to push forward, how to lead. Um,
Mhm.
and lean into others that may be experiencing that as well, because that's part of your testimony and your story that you can share with others to keep moving forward, even if it's years at a time. Hey, I've done that. I've been there. So thank you for sharing that. And, here at Matriarch, we recognize that, and we are always trying to create safe spaces for that very reason. I know we do have a few in the military, some that have served previously, some that are active military like yourself. But allowing those safe spaces to fail, even
Mhm.
because even as a Black female, you are taught from day one there's no failure allowed, which doesn't really
Mhm.
serve us well. I think we are the first generation really talking about, failure lessons serving us for the greater good, not only of ourselves, but of other women. You don't have this judgment of, oh, well, she messed that up. Well, we're not going to take her on, because that slows the rest of us down, right? We are always keeping in mind what the rest of us are
Mhm.
doing and how we are seen. But not allowing those safe spaces is at our own detriment as well, because we're saying you need to be at peak Black excellence
Yeah.
in order to move forward. And that
Yes.
is a false narrative. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes. I can. So we're pretty much expected, and even I even saw it in this, even in this position, the position that I sit in right now. Some people would think there's just no way, but even in this position, I had an encounter where someone pretty much almost expected that I would just kind of sit to the side and let them say what they want and do what they want without truly understanding who I am and why I'm here.
Mhm.
And even growing up, it was just a lot of, oh, this person makes me uncomfortable. This person makes me feel this way, and not ever once being asked. Never once am I being asked, well, how do you feel?
Mhm.
Because my feelings didn't
Mhm.
matter. I was to immediately conform or expected to conform based on how someone else, and I think we all know what that someone else looks
Mhm.
like, because they just said the words, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like this. I feel this way because of this person. Oh, well then I need you to act the way that makes this person comfortable. Like an immediate expectation. What I love now, how we're able to say, okay, well, please bring that person into my office and we can sit down and have a conversation.
100%.
Not everyone can do that. And that's why I'm here. I did not have that for me, but I will be that for the folks that I remember where I came from. I remember each and every one of those encounters. So that expectation, I make sure is not tolerated. I have very close and frequent conversations with my commander. More specific to your question, how we combat that, we're on the same page. We have to walk together. We have to remain lockstep. We are the two individuals leading the installation. As problems arise, and because of where I'm stationed in Wyoming, you can probably imagine accurately what the diversity looks like here and what challenges come as a result of that. So we're constantly engaged with managing the community's expectations. We let them know what is going to be tolerated amongst our military members, what is not. We have a very wonderful and close relationship with the mayor and the governor, and we stay engaged. So much so that any proclamation signings that we have, or that the state has, we have them together. They're invited onto the installation. The community is aware that how you treat one citizen, you will treat all.
Mhm.
And that with it, they will all be treated very respectfully. It is always a conversation. We don't hide anything. We don't hide anything at all.
Love that.
It is now my business to change the attitudes of those community members that see that we should be a regressed people, if you
Mhm.
will. And I consider that my personal responsibility to take that on. And I have no problems with that whatsoever.
Yeah, and thank you for taking that on. It is so important that those conversations, number one, be had, and the threat of those words, um, I feel uncomfortable, which is a trigger word for a Black woman walking anywhere and, on a job today, especially corporate America, and that I've experienced myself. It matters to have people in
It
place
does.
that understand what it is to be on the opposite end of that. And to say, okay, I have it within me to call out exactly what that is. And let's really talk about or get at the bottom of what the word uncomfortable really means. And so, um,
Absolutely.
talking through that and having, not only public officials, but just individuals that can learn from that experience and also know that that's not
Hmm.
tolerated is half the battle. So, thank you
Hmm.
for doing that as well. Um,
Absolutely. And a lot of time, Ashley, it's as simple as a
mhm,
conversation because a lot of folks is just, for lack of a better word, it's just an
mhm,
ignorance. You don't know what's different from you. And instead of addressing it or having a conversation about it or taking the moment to understand it, it's immediately uncomfortable for you
yes,
without taking one step to understand that it can be just as uncomfortable for the other individual as
mm,
well. But the expectation that because it's uncomfortable for me, you should change is where we're trying to change that
yes,
mindset.
and, that kind of goes along with unpotential bias, of recognizing
Yes.
what that is and, just trying to move forward. But, yeah. So, thank you so much, about sharing from ground zero to what it is to be with family and in the military and being a woman in leadership and still being that bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, vibrant person and personality that we all get to see when you're out of uniform. It is just a pleasure, and thank you, thank you, thank you for writing history in current day. We just appreciate you so much, number 1, for doing this, and thank you for, supporting Matriarch and our platform. We will definitely have you on again, and we are so,
Thank
so
you.
happy to have you a part of a movement of Black women that not only are empowered, but supportive of one another in our successes and in our failures. So thank you so much. We are so, so blessed to have you, and you'll definitely be back.
Thank you. And actually, I would be remiss if I did not thank you for the exact same. Having served 24 years in the military, having my daughter along with a great portion of that journey, watching other individuals, other families, I can only imagine what we could have done if we had a platform such as the one that you have introduced to bring us together, to share ideas, to be a support system when we're moving from place to place and not feeling alone because you are making something that is a constant no matter where we are, where we go, what we do, and you're bringing real life matters to the table, how you start a business, how do you transition, how do you look for great health care and do all these things, and how do you serve in these capacities is absolutely phenomenal. I am truly honored to be amongst you. So thank you for what you have done for our community.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, that has touched my heart. After this, I'm gonna go cry in a corner. 'Cause I'm so thankful, and I really appreciate, the fact that you know and feel exactly what it is we are trying to do here. So, thank you so much. We will have you on again, and we love you. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.
I love you and God bless you too. It was my honor. Thank you.
Matriarch would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. Please visit matriarchmom.com to continue the conversation and join the sisterhood of other legendary Black queens in the making.